So, you have groups of people who don't want to work. They hate capitalism. They hate tradition. They think socialism is the way forward, despite numerous nations having tried it and ending in the deaths of millions and starvation. And you could even get people from those nations to talk to these people and it won't make a lick of difference because they're just that thick. You've got a recipe for disaster. What is it with this generation and culture? Why is it so misguided? Why does it have so much contempt for everything that came before it and everyone that came before it? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. People will say the obvious, which is indoctrination, and I fully agree with that. But it feels almost spiritual. From a Christian perspective, it feels like the devil's latest tactic is to get people to believe that evil is good and good is evil. And he has a strong chokehold over younger generations, and even some of the older generations. They see the world around them, they see that several things are tilted in an unfair direction, and they want to make it fair. But they don't want to make it fair through actual fair means. They want to make it fair through means that cause more authoritarian control and more destruction and less freedom. They have their ideologies and they want to force everybody to agree with their ideologies. No dissent. No saying no to our ideology. Things like race realism, racial identitarianism. You can't oppose that, otherwise you're a racist. Sexual identitarianism, homosexual, transgender, whatever you want to say, in that whole umbrella. No disagreeing with that. Or you're a homophobe, or a transphobe, or a istophobe, or whatever. Gender identitarianism. Women are fantastic and you can't question anything they do. Or you're a sexist. We've heard the same arguments over and over again. They've even called people worse things, like Nazis and fascists. Because that's what anybody who leans to the right is. No. Most people on the political right don't even agree with those philosophies. They've got family members who fought against those philosophies in the Second World War, for crying out loud. They know how evil that stuff was. It's just another lie. It's a lie that's perpetuated and it's kept arguments going endlessly that don't need to happen. It's just words to dismiss any arguments you may have. Well, you're a Nazi, you're a racist, it's just the same over and over and over again ad nauseum, and it just ends the conversation. They don't want to debate. At that point, they're just convinced that they're right, and that's it. So when reality comes knocking, they're always blindsided by it. We don't live in a socialist culture. We live in a republic that is capitalist, and as a result, it has thrived. But the problem is not capitalism. The problem is unfettered corporate greed. Unfettered corporatism, a merging of corporation and government. They shouldn't be anywhere near each other, but yet they're practically in bed with each other. Politicians making backdoor deals with all sorts of corporations and favoring corporations, making legislations that favor corporations instead of favoring people, favoring wars instead of favoring people's safety, and over again. There's little to no way to keep our politicians accountable except to vote them out, and that's starting to not work anymore. People don't get the votes that they need for one reason or another. People don't have faith in the system. They accuse it of being fraudulent. Whether or not it actually is remains to be seen beyond a shadow of a doubt. But they have no faith in it. That's the core point. They don't believe in it. Some people say, I'm not going to vote ever again. That's when you lose the country, because then people can just take control. You've got a generation that doesn't want to work. My folks were at Wendy's the other day, and it seems like every time they go, every other day, they have to close the place down because they can't get help. The pandemic created a generation of people who just want to stay home and incentivize them to do so. It's done almost irreversible damage to the job market. So something's going to happen. Either people are going to have to start losing benefits so that they can go to work, There's going to have to be some sort of way where they're going to be forced to work because they can't live without it. They can't have all the luxuries they want without it. They don't seem to realize that you lose your home, you lose your car. If you're not able to work and provide for yourself, you lose all of the luxuries that you love and sit around wanting to engage with. You have to work. It's been true since the beginning of time, even before the types of government that we have. You have to provide. We were once hunter-gatherers. If you didn't know how to hunt or gather, you were useless or elderly. But otherwise, you weren't very useful. You wouldn't survive, if anything. You died a lot younger. People worked a lot younger too, so they died a lot younger. But when you're older and able-bodied, you absolutely should be working. Doesn't mean you have to work a physical labor job all the time. Trust me, I did a physical labor job that I was under the impression wasn't as physical as it was. It took its toll on me, and I was like, I can't keep up with this. I love the job for everything but that reason. It was a great job interacting with people, getting out of the house. But I wasn't physically prepared for it or in shape for it. And I came home hurting way more than I felt like I should. I couldn't do anything else that I needed to do. So, as I'm in the process of being between jobs, I'm looking for something that is less physical but still productive, and still with decent pay to be able to help support myself. Thankfully, I don't have much to worry about except for my own personal expenses. I don't have a family, so I don't have to worry about that, but a lot of people do. A lot of people just won't start families because they think it's too expensive. And everything, including inflation. Inflation's another problem. Nobody in government seems to be willing to tackle the issue of inflation. It's just getting worse. Every time I go somewhere to spend something, it physically hurts. It's hard to spend under $30 on just your basics. If you get a bunch of stuff, it's expensive. You almost have to space out what you get, and you have to make what you've got last. If we don't reverse this, it'll become unsustainable and businesses will shutter. Between that and not being able to find help, a bunch of businesses are going to shutter. They're going to be asking the government for bailouts with money the government doesn't have. It seems like whoever's in power is intent on letting us fail. There's no faith in it. It's just corrupt. People all the time who call it corrupt get gaslit. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, look around you. Look how bad things are for how many people. For every person that's well off and smart with their finances and everything is going relatively okay, there's 5 or 6 other people who are struggling to just make the ends meet. They're working as hard as they can, but their companies can't afford to pay them to keep up with all the inflation. So you have to take multiple jobs. Parents can't spend meaningful time with their kids because they have to be at work 24/7, both of them. So they get rotated around at daycare, and that damages the kids mentally. It's a horrible domino effect. Families are being destroyed in this country systematically. Because I'm not going to say there's nobody devoted to fixing this. There are people, but they're being ignored. That reeks of corruption. Do people in power actually want to help people, or do they want to line their own freaking pockets? If they want to line their own freaking pockets, they don't deserve to be in the positions that they're in. We as the people need to start voting out do-nothing politicians. Fix the economy. Secure the border. Start manufacturing things again. Stop with this green spending nonsense. We don't need it. We don't need electric cars. Continue to invest in research on them, but don't pull a California and say we've got to invest in stupid sinus infection. Excuse me. Don't pull a California and say we're going to have all electric cars and trucks and nothing else by 2030. That's draconian and stupid. Those politicians should be in jail for such lunacy. They should be. They're sabotaging their citizenry and their economy for the sake of green virtue signaling. It's like they're diseased in the head. It's disgusting. What about your people who can't afford these? What about the infrastructure and how that's going to affect the electrical grid that already relies on so many other things? What about all of the problems with electric cars compared to internal combustion engines as it stands? I get you want to save the environment. Cars aren't the biggest threat to the environment. That's always been a lie. They're using environmentalism to control how people conduct their lives. They're going to destroy people's lives and not even notice or care. It's no wonder that society is getting more violent and more unstable. People are getting mentally unstable and homeless. You've got evil people in power. Either evil through purposeful or through negligence, or both. Nobody seems to want to help your average American. They just spend a bunch of money on a bill that does nothing. They just spend away money that they don't even have while banks collapse and while war is on the horizon overseas. Lord help us in 2024. We need it. At this point, I'm sure enough people don't care who it is as long as they're devoted to helping the economy, securing the border, and fixing all of our dang problems. And that includes people in Congress, too. It's not just the president. It has to be people in Congress and the Senate. When are people going to learn to vote for the individuals who are going to actually fix the real problems that you have to deal with day to day? How bad do the problems have to get before people realize that? How bad? Do you have to be kicked out of your own home? To lose every job that you get? Your kids have to starve and end up in the hospital? It's the presidency. It doesn't matter if you don't like the president. What matters is if they're devoted to fixing the economy, if they're devoted to securing the border, to not increasing new wars, and to pushing for less government, because more government is how we've gotten into this absolute hellfire, then it doesn't matter what their personality is. And I'm talking to people who specifically who hate the last president. They ignore all the things that he did positive. Some of those same people have gone, well, I mean, if he's willing to fix those things again, then why not? If he can help save us from those things, and Congress has to work with him if he gets in again. They're trying everything to keep him out. Why do they hate him so much? I've asked that from the very beginning. I don't agree with everything he said. I've been disgusted by some things he said. But he did the job better than most people who have come before him. He said, I'm going to fix these problems. And the people said, yes, we want you to fix these problems. Go in so you can fix those problems. And then he did. And then the other things he tried to do, Congress said, nope, can't do that. The people have every right to be pissed at Congress. What are you doing? Why are you standing in the way of what we the people want? We need help. He's trying to help us. What is your aversion to helping the people who you claim to serve? What is your problem? You can't contribute that to anything other than benevolent evil. Thinking they know better than you and I. Half of them don't even understand economics in Congress. It's embarrassing. They get in because voting has been reduced to nothing but a personality contest, not a who is the smartest economically and in terms of foreign policy and all the issues that actually matter. People ignore all of that. And as a result, they vote based on team lines only. They don't look at policy even within those team lines. It's a dangerous situation. We're setting ourselves up for so much failure if we don't get our act together. Because let me tell you something. If 2024 goes wrong, then we may do irreversible damage to this nation economically, militarily, culturally, in terms of our kids' education. A lot of things hinge on this election, and they know that. So if those in power try to stop somebody from actually fixing it in a meaningful and non-corrupt way, all hell is going to break loose. All hell is going to break loose. God help us all if it does. One day it's going to happen anyway. You know, it might just be somebody who gets in, forestalls the inevitable. But so much has been damaged. You've got a generation that just doesn't care. It just wants what it wants. We've bred them to do that. We've trained them to be selfish narcissists who are obsessed with their phones and social media. There's a handful of them that do care. But compared to their contemporaries, their adults, their predecessors, there's not enough. Their world is going to be so much worse than ours. By the time I'm long dead, should I live to be, say, 60, 70, which I don't know if I will. I mean, God willing, I don't know what my lifespan is. I don't know what can happen between now and then. It's going to be bad. It's going to be so bad. There's going to be so many people who don't understand so much. A lot of people who are wandering in the dark, or were just trained to let somebody else deal with something. Is the very concept of being a productive, independent individual is disappearing in favor of let somebody else do it. Eventually you run out of somebody else's. It's a scary thought, but that's where we're headed. Parents, I urge you, teach your kids valuable skills. Teach them money, economics. Teach them business. Teach them how to take care of the home that they live in. How to be responsible. How to do the right thing, to not steal, to not cheat. To have base level respect for their fellow man. Instill principles. Spend time with them. And I know it's difficult because you have to work. Sacrifice as much time as you know you can. Be intentional with them, even if they don't want to hear it. That's what my parents did. I turned out better for it. Because if you don't, you're setting themselves up to destroy themselves. You don't want that. I don't want that. They don't want that. You gotta give them a fighting chance in this corrupt, twisted world. Because right now we've set them up for abject failure. We've set them up for destruction at their own hands because we've gotten them to believe lies about the past being evil, about where identity comes from, and what really matters in the world. We're telling them things matter that don't. We're telling them that race matters. It doesn't. We're telling them gender matters. It doesn't. We're telling them sexuality matters. It doesn't. And they're ignoring everything else as a result of these things. If they live to be 70, 80, they're going to look back on their lives and see how wasted it was. As they're feeble and less capable, they're going to be more depressed than ever. There was a time when elderly folks were very jubilant despite their bodies falling apart. They lived a good life. But so many of these kids have spent their lives believing such radical lies and being so filled with hatred towards everybody around them, including people who claim to love them. They'll look back, and once those people are gone, they'll have nothing, and they'll be discouraged beyond belief. They will have realized, hopefully, that their lives have been just a waste, believing lies that gave them, they promised them the world, but gave them nothing. But being alone and old. No foundation. That's sad. It's not fair to them. It's not fair that we send them off to school to get indoctrinated and believe that socialism and Marxism and all these destructive ideologies are the way forward, to get them to be militant about them, to hate other people who don't agree with those principles, if you can even call those principles. Setting them up to fail, to be constantly arrested, to not be able to hold down a job, to not be able to take care of themselves before they're of an age where they physically can't take care of themselves. We're setting them up to be worse than children. So that way the government can come in and take care of all of their needs, and they lose any independence. Your independence is one of the most valuable things you have, and you don't realize it until you lose it. These kids are being trained to push for ideology that will yank it away from them. They don't even see it because they're so thoroughly into it. They're so angry at the perceived injustices around them at every corner. There are injustices at every corner. Every time somebody says no, or that they disagree with what they've been taught, they fly off the handle. You see all sorts of videos, all these liberal freakouts, all of these different things. They've made these young kids mentally unstable and confrontational with everybody who opposes them. They're setting themselves up, they're setting them up for horrific failure. Like I said, if they grow to be 80, 90, they're just going to be so miserable. Many of them might even take their own lives. Just the thought of them being set up to be destroyed is... I can disagree with these people, but man, it's like The way they're set up, it's like they never had a chance. Because they got so deep into it that nobody could talk them out of it. They were on the ledge and nobody was able to talk them off it. Because they were just so convinced they needed to engage in social justice battles. And demonize everybody and everything around them. To the point where there was no one left. They started turning on each other. And they were all left on abandoned islands by themselves, depressed and lonely. And ultimately destroying themselves. Sad. There's always hope for them in Christ, and I believe that that's where their salvation will come. And I know not everybody who watches is a Christ follower, but I've seen God change the worst of the worst. He changed Paul. Paul used to murder Christians, and he became one of the greatest apostles history has ever known. So God can do it. Don't say that God can't. He absolutely can and has. We need to be praying that he does the next couple of generations, because if God doesn't intervene soon, we will be in some deep, deep trouble. We're already in deep trouble economically. We need him, and we need to return to traditional values. I think we need to work with some of these people who are thoroughly indoctrinated into this stuff and start saying, look, we don't hate you. We just don't want to see you fail to the point of no return, which is what this is all leading to. You can't see that now. You think you're on a righteous crusade now, but at the end of the tunnel isn't light. It really isn't. Trust me when I say at the end of the woke tunnel isn't true social justice. It's just more inner oppression, depression, loneliness, because you will have driven people away. The anger, the vitriol, the combativeness, that's going to push everyone in your life away. Because they won't be able to stand it. You'll be alone. So, I pity this generation. But it's got to find its hope in Christ and in people who... It's got to be willing to listen to people who genuinely want to help it. This indoctrination is so evil, and it makes me so angry because it's so hard to punch through. Because it appeals to emotion. It says that everything around you is a horrific lie, and you need to be combative. You need to, it's militant. You see all sorts of videos of liberal freakouts and riots and all of these things. They're being indoctrinated foot soldiers, and it's going to end terribly for them. They'll be in and out of prison. They won't be able to hold jobs. They'll lose everything. I don't wish that on my worst enemy. I really don't. I know some of you are just like, screw them. They've done so much evil. It's like, they've only been doing what they believe is right. It's just a horrific lie that they have no ability to see past because they're in the thick of it. Something has to happen to them that'll jog them out of it. I don't know what it is, what they have to lose in their life, but it's going to have to be something. Only God knows. Anyways, let me know what you think is going on with this generation and this culture. And I'll talk to you guys next time. This has been Super Koopa TV with another edition of Koopa Talks. God bless. May he help us all in the future. Have a good one. Peace.